This 2016 Yamaha R1 has spent the last 2 years of its life getting abused on track. But that meant when it popped up for sale, it was going cheap.
Like 25% off.
So I didn't hesitate to snap it up because it's been my dream bike since my dad got this one 6 years ago.
And now I'm turning it back into a street bike, because who doesn't want their dream bike for cheaper?
Plus it's only done 9,000 kilometers and came with a road kit.
But as you might expect, I quickly ran into a few problems.
First, it wouldn't start because the battery was dead. Then the throttle randomly stopped responding for a few minutes.
No throttle.
But that didn't stop me from taking it to the racetrack, where it did this on acceleration. Not good. And then there's that road kit. Turns out the headlight assembly has 3 broken parts. Pieces of the fairings are missing and they're not OEM. So in the last video I ordered some parts I was missing from Yamaha.
Well, they're finally here. And in only 2 weeks instead of the promised 3 weeks, which is pretty cool. And I think this is the biggest box I've ever gotten from Yamaha.
I thought my kitten needed a cooler box, so I bought him this Yamaha one for $350. Doesn't he look faster now? But the good news is that it also came with a free intake duct, which I happen to need since mine is cracked. I also got all the other cracked parts, like the plastic shroud and the stay for the mirrors, but those didn't come in boxes. There's some other important parts too, like the brake light switch for the front brake lever and rear seat bracket that was missing on my bike.
And then I also managed to buy some stock rear sets for my bike, and they just so happen to come with free passenger foot pegs as well, which I actually do have, but on the off chance that these might be in a better condition than mine, more parts, more fun. So these are just stock R1 rear sets, but they are complete. It's still got the brake lever, the spring, it even has the bracket for the brake light, which I will need to get. Then the left-hand side came with the brake lever, luckily, because mine is terrible. And these are in pretty good condition because they came off of an R1 that's getting turned into a track bike. And yes, I do see the irony in that. But the reason I ended up going for stock R1 rear sets instead of aftermarket options is mainly because these look nice, they're already mostly black, and they're quite a bit cheaper. Cheap aftermarket rear sets look terrible, where these look quite nice. And expensive aftermarket rear sets, like the GYTR ones that I think are ghillies, are about $600 or more, which is crazy considering these were only about $175. They are secondhand, but they're going to do the job perfectly and look better than what's on there. So here's the to-do list for today. I want to scrub the exhaust system and clean the front and bottom of the engine while the bike is naked. Then I want to get the kickstand installed because you guys know how much I've been missing that. We can also get the headlight assembly fixed and mounted to the bike. And lastly, get the new rear sets and passenger foot pegs installed. But hopefully even more if I have enough time, like get that rear seat bracket installed. So let's get to it.
The whole exhaust looked pretty dull and bad, so I wanted to polish it. The only issue is that you can't get to the headers without removing the radiator and oil cooler, so I embarked on a bigger mission. But not without contemplating life beforehand. After draining all the coolant, every drop of it, I was able to loosen off all the radiator hoses to remove it. However, all of these connectors that are for things like the turn signals in the mirrors and headlights have been zip tied away here since they're not needed on a track bike, but they were in the way of my radiator removal job. So I set them free since I will need them soon enough anyway. And hopefully just this bolt gives you an idea as to why I want to scrub everything on this bike. There were a few more zip ties holding the radiator back and the fan connectors, but eventually I got it out. The oil cooler is much easier because it has longer lines, so I could just remove the bolts and move it out of the way as needed. I smothered the headers and link pipe with the traditional toilet cleaner and let it sit for a few minutes before going to town on them with a Brillo pad to remove as much dirt, grime and rust as possible. It's not a fun job with curvaceous headers and made me miss my MT-09 that had 25% less work to do, but hopefully it will be worth the effort. I also made sure to clean all the bolts and exhaust springs, and besides having quite a few bent fins, the radiator cleaned up relatively well. The bottom of the engine feels really oily. I don't think it currently has an oil leak, but it may have had one in the past. So I took advantage of my naked R1 and cleaned the bottom and front of the engine, which isn't normally so accessible. And even the oil cooler looked better after some TLC. The next day I polished the headers with some Autosol metal polish and steel wool. This is one of those jobs that doesn't really feel like you're making a difference until you look back at what you started off with. They're nowhere near perfect, but I should sleep better now, which meant it was time to undo the whole process with the help of my assistant.
So after 2 days of cleaning, I'm basically right back where I started, but cleaner. I'm not going to put coolant in just yet because I still need to mount up the coolant reservoir on the side here, but also because I don't have enough coolant at the moment. A kickstand might be dead weight on a race bike, but boy do you miss it when you're trying to just move the bike around. A paddock stand is never where you need it to be, and it's impossible to push a bike and carry a paddock stand. So let's put this back on the bike.
Fortunately, I have the kickstand itself, even with its bolt, spring and kickstand kill switch that kills the engine if you put the bike into gear with the stand still down, so you don't pole vault yourself into an early grave. However, the cable on the kill switch has been cut rather than unplugged. This is because if you twist the wires together, you can fool the bike into thinking the kill switch is still there. I also found another empty connector that I assume is for the stock quickshifter. I made sure to get the layer of chain lube off of all the parts and then set about repairing the cut wires. Wiring is not my strong point, but I did buy some heat shrink to make it look as professional as possible. And I don't think it came out too badly for my first time using heat shrink. With the hard part done, I bolted on the kickstand, and putting the spring on was easier than I thought. I expected it to be really strong, but I was stronger, surprisingly. The only thing that was missing were the bolts to mount the kill switch, so I had to go grab some new ones. And now you'd never even know it had been cut.
Are you ready for this? I mean, there's not much that can go wrong, but I do want to test it out. Oof. It's a sexy angle. I missed that. That's a good noise. You can't get that noise on a track bike. Once more. I'm 99% sure that the kill switch does work. Like I said, there's no coolant in it, so I'd rather not start it, even though it could run for a few minutes without overheating. But we'll test it another day. Since this is or was a track bike, it has aftermarket rear sets here. So these allow you to put them in just about any position you like. Forwards, backwards, up, down. You can suit any rider. They also are able to go a lot higher, so you're less likely to scrape the foot peg on the ground when you're cornering. However, this one is particularly ugly because it's bent and scratched, and it doesn't even match the one on the other side. So I do want to replace them.
I started by removing the left side because it doesn't have any levers attached to it. I think it's safe to say that stock looks better in this case. I cleaned up the mating surface and was happy to see the stock bolts were still in good shape, so it was straightforward. But the same could not be said about the gear lever. This is not the stock bolt and doesn't fit in the OEM lever, nor was it in my random selection of bolts. I could probably make it fit, but I want it done properly, so I went to see what I was missing. There might be an easier way, but this is how I find diagrams and part numbers so I know what I'm missing. I go to partzilla.com, select my specific bike, and then it gives you loads of component categories. It usually takes a few attempts to find the exact area you want, but eventually you can see how everything goes together and see part numbers. Like here, I need number 31, 32 and 33, but I'll have to order that, so I moved on to the other side. The right hand side doubles as the mount for the rear master cylinder. I had to slide the heel guard out of the way because one of the bolts was stripped, but it worked. And then the brake lever is also attached to the master cylinder with a clevis pin and split pin, both of which had seen better days, so I got replacements. I also removed the exhaust hanger for the stock exhaust because it was rubbing on my SC project, and once everything was installed, I made sure to remove the hero blobs as well, because how else am I going to be a hero? Now for the small parts. I made sure to get the missing bolts for the rear seat lock while I was bolt shopping, so I threw that on quickly before doing the brake light switch. I got the switch itself, screw, washer and spring washer, which was the only thing in this gigantic bag. It's literally a single screw and plugging it in to install the switch, but the Litec lever didn't have the attachment needed to press the switch, so I swapped it out for the stock lever until I figure out what I want to do about it. And now it makes that signature clicking noise again.
So now I at least have one brake light switch on the bike, on the front brake. The rear brake still doesn't have one, I'm gonna have to order one. But in the meantime, I'm gonna plug a brake light in and see if it works. So this is the TST Industries brake light that came with the bike. I also have the stock one, but this one was at the top of the box. Let's try this. Flashing quite quickly because obviously there's less resistance in the system. There's no front indicators, but that's a good sign. We got two options when it comes to brake lights, and I'm pleased to see we have indicators built into this because that means I don't have to put the stock tail tidy and stock indicators on. Pretty cool. And I think I've left the most intricate job for last, mostly because I've been procrastinating. So this is our headlight assembly with 3 broken parts, and here are the replacement parts. Our plastic shroud, our intake duct, and our mirror stay. So this thing I think is going to be complicated. I can already see homemade brackets connecting the mirror stay to the intake duct. So I'm definitely going to be missing bolts, which is why I think it's going to be a big job. But first of all, let's get it dusted off a bit because it looks dreadful.
Turns out I was worried about nothing. It's put together in a very simple manner. It still had a piece of trim on its underside that I removed and then went after the headlights, which were just 5 bolts. At this point, I was still sure it would be impossible, so I took loads of photos in case I forgot how it was put together, but I never needed them. When I took parts off of the broken assembly, I put them straight onto the new part so I didn't lose any pieces or put them in the wrong place. And 4 bolts later, I got the mirror stay off with the intake duct still attached thanks to those homemade brackets. I needed these rubber pieces and grommets from the old part, as well as these clips that have threads in them, and that meant I was done with 2 out of the 3 broken parts. Next was this intake rubber seal thing that needed a quick clean before going onto the new plastic shroud, and then all that was left to remove were the DRLs. So basically, every part of this other than the headlights and DRLs was broken, but that actually made it easier to fix because everything was replaced. This is how the intake duct comes from Yamaha, already assembled, and it's clear why it costs $350. It's got a diaphragm and whatever this is, it has a fence to stop birds getting in, a brand new intake temperature sensor, and you can even see the flapper that opens and closes as well. There's more going on here than I'd expect, but all that mattered is that it slotted in easily, which meant I could put the headlights back on and call it complete.
Ironically, this is the job I've been putting off all week because I was pretty sure it would be a pain in the ass with so many pieces, and I was sure I would have missing bolts and stuff like that. But all of this said and done, it looks a hell of a lot better, and I'm only missing 2 bolts, these 2 here. So I've taken a sample, but I will be able to access them with this mounted to the bike. So I think let's put it on the bike and see if we can get these lights to do their thing and light up.
It's attached to the frame with only 4 bolts. But in the middle of that, I gave my girlfriend a mission. It's her job to install the passenger foot pegs, since she's probably going to use them more than I am. I made sure to supervise closely because I don't want her to get hurt. I don't know what I'd do without the R1. But my girlfriend nailed the install, and at least now I can't be blamed if they fall off. And back at the front of the bike, I got the dash installed and plugged the headlights and DRLs in.
The moment of truth. We managed to get the tail light working today. Do you think the same can be said about the headlights? It's all mounted, everything's plugged in, so it's time to turn the key. To be honest, I don't know what is supposed to come on when you turn the key. Possibly DRLs, possibly nothing at all. We got DRLs. I'm pretty sure that the main headlights are only supposed to come on once you fire the bike up, but once again, there's no coolant in it, so I'm not going to do that today. But given that the DRLs are working, I'm pretty confident that the headlights will as well. One thing left to do. Back in 2015, when this generation of R1 came out, one of the more subtle upgrades were the wheels. These are forged magnesium wheels, as opposed to the cast alloy wheels that previous R1s came with. Even the R1S, the sort of budget R1, comes with cast alloy wheels, not these magnesium ones. And I assume that they're lighter and stiffer and more amazing in every single way. But personally, I just like the shape of them, the design of them. They have this sort of 10-spoke design that run in pairs of 2, and there's a groove down each spoke, and I just prefer it over the previous shape. However, because they're in black, they often get lost in the shadows, so you don't really see the shape of them or appreciate it. So I'm going to take these to get them powder coated in a lighter color so that I can enjoy the shape of them, and so it complements the color of the bike when it's finished.
So the R1 is now cleaner, it has a kickstand, it has new foot pegs front and back, it has a rear seat lock, brake light switch, and a headlight assembly that is actually mounted to the bike and no longer cracked. And all I spent today was $175 on rear sets and $7 on bolts.
Basically, all we need to do is throw some fairings on the bike and we can go for a ride.
Okay, there's a bit more than that. Besides the gear lever bolt I'm missing and powder coating the wheels, I also want to sort out these engine guards, preferably get some new clip-ons, ugly frame sliders, there's the scratch tank we need to consider, suspension, and probably get it tuned for the street.
But anyway, I feel like I can finally see the light and it's starting to look more like an R1. So let me know what color you think the wheels are going to be, and I'll see you on the next ride.